You know what they say about freedom without accountability, breeding irresponsibility. Because accountability really should breed responsibility. And we're here standing up to the game with our own share of being responsible. Good morning and welcome. Of course, it's a call to charge for you as well, to stand up to the show. This is the Morning Starter, your perfect morning starter, right here on Channels Television. I am Bukola Koka, and I'm here with my guys, Jeffrey and Coyote. Hi, Coyote. It's good to see you. It's good to see you to Jeffrey.
Good to see you too. Welcome to the program. I'm Jeffrey Uzama.
Since we're rhyming, we'll bring the reality of the ability. I don't know, it doesn't quite make sense. Good morning. Welcome to the show. I'm Coyote Okikyolo. And what a way to start, Bukola. Very instructive words. I want to ask what you're tracking, but clearly that is from what you're tracking. That's from the depth of what you're tracking this morning. Jeffrey, what are you tracking?
There's a lot. I don't even know where to start from. So I've been processing the whole memoir of IBB. And I asked myself, if Nigeria was a country that punishes bad behavior or consequence for bad behavior, what would have happened now? Annulling the election, whether he did it directly or someone else did it and he took responsibility, what does taking responsibility mean now for every life that was lost? I was a witness of history. At least I was a teenager, so I was aware of what went on. I may not have been directly involved in a few things. So the people that died, the families that were in disarray, the people that still have the pain. And more importantly, that election botched the ability for Nigeria to believe in the electoral system. Up until then, the level of belief, because if you know how it built up, the military formed the SDP and the NRC because they didn't want the money bags to take over. But the money bags still came. The presidential primaries were cancelled two times before eventually the people like Abiola came into the scene. But at the end of the day, when people voted, and this general consensus as at that day till today, that was the freest and the fairest election. So imagine if we had built on that till now. Because sometimes they say, forget about the past. It doesn't work like that. When people say those things, you need to understand how psychology works. For instance, you're a religious person. Words were used to build whatever faith you have, and it took years to build it. It also takes years to deconstruct things. So I think it's a bit insensitive when people say, let's move. You don't just move on like that. So I'm asking the question, now that he has accepted responsibility for national interests, according to him, what should we do with IBB as a country? Forgive him, because he did a lot of great things, we must also say. Private sector, from media to infrastructure to banking, we'll give him a lot of credit. But what should we do with this confession? Or this taking responsibility? I've been processing it. Yeah, but maybe your answer and my answer are literally the same.
I don't know why Bukola is looking at me to be the judge in this case. It's a mixed bag, really, and I think you identified the issues quite succinctly. On the good side, you can credit him for a lot of things.
A lot of things.
The creation of 13 states, NDLEA, FRSC, NBC, NCC, some of the agencies you still see today.
Those solid political parties.
Right, and then the political parties being formed. Essentially, people would even say that he's partly responsible for that free and fair election.
Yes, he is.
That actually held that year. So that singular pronouncement of annulling the election is now the sore point, the very sad part of the whole story.
Winning a lottery and losing your ticket.
Right, so you'd understand why a lot of people are wondering, so what do we do from there? But guys, it is what it is. Who is going to bail the cat, if there's even any cat to bail right now? Because the president's spokesman, yes, came on Sunrise Daily recently to say, well, IBB was not President Tinubu's tormentor.
That's right, was wrong.
Yeah. That it wasn't his tormentor. In fact, that the president credited him for being one of the reasons for him joining politics, because he encouraged people to come into politics. So
he also has that credit too.
Right. So it's a mixed bag, I must say, and I think it's now the government or generality of Nigerians to now decide what should be done. If there is anything to be done in any case.
Well, is it really for Mr. Ononuga to tell us whether or not IBB was President Tinubu's tormentor at the time?
Just to understand the government's thinking, actually. That, yeah. Hey, this is a great man.
But you know that, descendants or active participants of, the anti-military regime, dictatorship at that time are coming out to, hold President Tinubu to account, to say that, why are you glorifying the same man who persecuted our fathers during the military regime? And it was some sort of an irony, that President Tinubu was giving credit to former military president Ibrahim Babangida for inspiring him to go into politics, in some sort of a paradoxical situation of what President Tinubu stood for during the military regime. Of course, he was also arrested and he went on exile. So we know all of these issues. Those issues that Jeffrey has outlined apart, what about the death of Dele Giwa? Of course, we heard the first-hand account of human rights lawyer Femi Falana yesterday of what exactly transpired. Of course, we can also talk about the murder of the military president's childhood friend at the time, Maman Vatsa, for which, of course, perhaps the family today may never, have recovered from. So these are the real issues. We've asked the question the day before, what should we do with the former military president's admission of guilt and taking responsibility for the activities of the time. But that's not what I'm tracking this morning, guys. I'm tracking 3.84% growth of the GDP, and I'm asking questions without discountenancing the NBS's, data. Real questions, about accountability. What exactly is happening with the administration's policies from commencement in May 2023. We could ask about the 3 billion naira, initial 3 billion naira given to subnationals, for the palliatives, to cushion the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy. We could ask about the National Reconstruction and Household Support Program. We could ask also about the Social Investment Program. These are real policies that we can question and ask about the direct impact on the economy at the national level and at the subnational level. We could ask so many other questions also about the savings from subsidy and the increase in allocation to the subnationals. How has it impacted, the people directly at the grassroots? If we went to budget to look into their books, would see the gaping lack of accountability and unspent funds, and where exactly budgets of the subnationals are going to. In fact, they're incurring more debt. So when the NBS is saying to us, oh, there's a 3.84% increase in gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is a way of measuring economic growth. Then there's a big question mark on that growth. But of course, Jeffrey has more to tell us in that regard.
We'll get to that at the point. I've been crunching the numbers, but let's get to what we're doing today on the program.
Okay.
As we start with the tax reforms debate, and of course that has been 2 days running now when the National Assembly has converged in one of the rooms to get the public view on all of this. So it continues to generate debate in quarters. We examine the potential impact of the bills on businesses, individuals, and economic growth while addressing concerns about fairness and implementation.
There's also the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics announcing an increase in food inflation. Of course, we told you about that. We'll be joined by a professor of agricultural economics to shed light on the impact of inflation on the masses, as well as potential solutions to easing the burden on ordinary Nigerians.
And they always say that, one route doesn't lead to the market. There's several routes to the market. And I'm not talking food this time around. I'm talking skills. We'll be touching base with an organization equipping young Africans with essential skills for career growth and entrepreneurship in an age where having more than one skill is necessary.
Absolutely. And we'll go to this very inspiring story. You need to be here to hear this lady's story about her journey from adversity to advocacy, where at the age of 23, she had stroke, but now she's helping others to walk that path and be better and possibly avoid these kind of situations in their life. So she'll be joining us on the program.
And that's not all. We'll be talking about strategies for promoting gender equality and youth empowerment in Nigeria. And guess what? We're talking to he for she. I always like to talk with he for she's. So join us. It's a bumper package that we have for you. As always, it's the morning brief, right?
It's a long ahead show when I had to chuckle.
The bumper package is back. But speaking of that bumper package, let's unwrap it with the dailies. We're starting off with the front pages this morning. And what do the front pages say? Well, let's find out together. We're starting off with the Nigerian Tribune. The Nigerian Tribune is talking about ways and means this morning. It's been a while you heard that expression, ways and means. At the time, ways and means was the headache of a lot of Nigerians because they saw what the former government did and they went, what? No way with this ways and means.
Maybe tell them what ways and means for those who are not tuned in.
Okay, let's take a look at the story and I'll break it down for you. So this is what you have on the front page. CBN frustrating probe into 30 trillion naira ways and means. So that is coming from the Senate panel. And you're wondering ways and means, what is it? Well, you see, when Nigeria needs money, there are different ways Nigeria can get money.
I like this class. Go ahead.
Well, you see, Nigeria can borrow from itself by way of printing money from. So it's borrowing from itself in some sense. It's funding itself, but it's borrowing from itself and its future. It is creating money where there is no money in that sense. So that's what ways and means is. And the former government, we understand, was very versatile.
It was very generous. The CBN was very generous.
It was very generous. I understand that the Senate is trying to probe that. In fact, this has been added to our debt now. So this is part of our debt because there was no value for the money being created. And that's a challenge with printing a lot of money. So what exactly or how exactly is the CBN frustrating this probe?
And there goes accountability again.
In addition to what Kayode has said, so the ways and means, as we speak, has been securitized into all of these bonds that you can now borrow, It's an
recall last year, October 1,
30 or
the
40
president
years
had
down the line.
erroneously said that the 30 trillion naira ways and means
That
had
was
been
not
cleared.
true.
It was not true.
You just securitize, and it's okay to securitize it. So basically, they overdrew from the CBN, and that's what Kayode is trying to say. In fact, I think what made it 30 trillion is the fact that interest has accrued. Because you're not supposed to borrow more than 5% of the previous year from what you generated that
according
revenue.
to law.
But they broke all the rules.
Because anyway, they said it was force majeure, that this was an extraordinary circumstance.
They were actually really broke because revenue to debt to revenue
90-something
was 97%, 98, 97. So you have like 2% as free fund to run. But that's where we'll give this government a bit of credit. I can be critical of this government. This one, they have tried by pushing that number way down to about 68%. So you have a lot of free funds to play. What they are doing with that free up money is a different kettle of fish. But for reducing it, I think kudos to them.
And many have attributed, debatably so, that the inflation we're witnessing now is as a result of the ways and means funds by the former administration, secured by the former administration.
Definitely. If you pump money into a system like that, even America had to deal with it during COVID. During COVID, a lot of people couldn't go to work, so those interventions, those monies that were given, you have, economics is like water to find its pond. There will be inflation. Kayode, do you have another story on this?
Well, quite a number of stories, really, but let me just take one more. And it's at the top corner of the front page. Senate is just, you see it very soon. Senate probes Natasha's conduct, may suspend her as she sues Akpabio aid for 100 billion naira over alleged defamation. I'm not going to get into this one. I saw that story and I had to reread it again. 100 billion naira. I'm not sure. I think this is the first time that I would see a senator suing a fellow senator, in this case, the Senate president.
Well, the Senate president doesn't have immunity, but I think if I read that story correctly, is what the aide wrote.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it should be careful because the language was very improper.
But he says that the aide, that particular suit said the aide must have written it on the authority or at least in the name of the Senate president. That's where he comes
sort all of that out in court at the end of the day. So the aide has to be careful.
Not necessarily so, without holding brief for the Senate president, but it may not necessarily so. We know time and again
but that's
how
what the suit
aides
says.
of politically exposed persons
can
be zealous in their work of protecting their principles.
Well, it now has has to account for using language, according to some of the language I can't even use on air. The whole issue of suspending, and that's, I don't want to go into that. They'll sort themselves out. But that issue of the suit, and sometimes the Senate President doesn't even help the matter in helping to defend him sometimes. In correcting her yesterday, he still made another statement. And I'm listening, I said, oh God, Godswill Akpabio, oh dear Senate President, calm down. Calm down, because while he was talking about rules are rules, these are these, that is that, it was very clear. Then he now mentioned that it's like, all these courts, more like courts returned or courts brought in senators or lawmakers, they are responsible for some of these things. It's like when we're doing orientation, since they were not here, they were busy fighting in court. That kind of, you shouldn't have had that.
Oh, goodness.
You shouldn't have had that. I just don't know. You know, he said his words sometimes just puts him in trouble. He's trying to correct the situation. He will not say another thing.
And, you know, trying to put humor into it. Not everybody takes it.
Yeah, he likes to just, maybe just
He's
make
a
it
jolly
light.
good fellow.
Yeah, like there's too much tension in this place. Let me throw humor. We like the tension.
And then the humor now gets him into trouble. Anyway, Bukola, let's go to the Vanguard, Abby.
Okay, so it's the Vanguard we're headed to next this morning, and it shows a different part entirely. Look at the headline: Insecurity, how lack of surveillance tech aids criminals, terrorists, and their host of riders there. Look at this one: Nigeria's 490 million naira failed CCTV project, fueling insecurity in FCT, others. And that was where I was headed without initially even taking a close look at that rider. What happened to that CCTV project? Of course, there's more to chew on from this particular one. Abductions for ransom, now order of the day. CCTV contractor vanishes with 490 million naira. Aliru, 7th House of Representatives said project abandoned. Failed projects, national embarrassment. That's ascribed to ex-DSS boss. And we've strengthened security agencies to meet emerging challenges. That's, of course, ascribed to the president. And, you know, kidnapping for ransom becoming the order of the day is in spite of the tireless efforts of the administration in the FCT and, of course, the police command in the federal capital to rein in on the situation. We know that several arrests have been made, particularly in the last 1 year. We hope that, of course, there's progress on this particular one. But it's an interesting story that Vanguard chooses to lead with this morning, and it is very, very important.
All right, so let's get to now the Guardian. Jonathan Jega carpet politicians, judiciary over, carpet politicians, judiciary INEC over flawed elections. So if you want to get details of that story, you can go to the page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. And then there are other ones as well. I'm trying to pick which, because the Natasha story is that the APC begins 2027 groundwork as Tinubu governors, party leaders meet on internal crisis. So on that one, of course, the former president of Nigeria, as far as, and then that Tahiru Jaga, who made the call in that election as well. I've been talking to everybody involved that perfecting the electoral process is in the interest of everybody. For the fact that your party is a beneficiary of a flawed system, you should not defend it. If it gets better, all of us, because you will lose tomorrow, you will win the next day. So that's how this thing works. But APC is doing their caucus meeting. They started yesterday, and eventually, finally, they're now doing their next meeting. The guys at the PDP were still waiting for them. So. Finally today, APC is going to hold its next meeting. Finally. So next meetings are supposed to be held every quarter by literally all the political parties according to their laws, which is why Rufai has been shouting there's no internal democracy in the party, because that's where they sit down to talk to themselves, quarrel with themselves, disagree, align the government policy with the program of the party and all of that. But finally, they are done caucus yesterday. Today is going to be next, so we'll see what the outcome will be and how they are repositioning for election. But guys, before we just leave this, because the GDP numbers are out, 3.84, quite impressive.
That's from Q4 2020.
From Q4, but in the entire year, I think it's about 3.4. But if you crunch the numbers year on year and the big levers, the big movers, I'm not really impressed. You see that food are still contributing the highest in 24% or so. And then you have the the back and forth between trade and telecommunications that always revolve around 15, 16. But how I look at those numbers is not in the big contribution, is how those sectors grow year on year. So you can see food is still doing what we call relative year, 2014 to 2024, 2025, 2023. They are doing about 1%, some are doing less than 1% and all of that.
Well, Jeffrey, beyond the numbers, I'm looking at the impact on the generality of Nigerians.
Telcos actually was a big loss.
Very hard to see the quick gains, the low-hanging fruits for Nigerians. Nigerians are still struggling.
Of course, that's a fact.
The weight, of the economic policies of this administration.
That's a fact.
So, numbers are just what they are, numbers. They stand very little as evidence to prove that indeed Nigerians are having a good time, with this administration's economic policies.
All right, so guys, where do we go from here?
I think naturally we can go to what you are saying about what is trending, and naturally the case between the Senate President and his colleague, Senator Natasha Koti-Odoanga, is the very first one. She has since sued the Senate President and his aide for apparently his 1.3 billion.
We're hearing all sorts of numbers.
There's 100 billion
somewhere.
And there's a compensation for litigation fees.
And there's a 300 million, I think. So together that's 103. But you know what? We'll take you through all of your comments regarding this. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, there's a lot more to talk about, particularly with the economy, the impact on production, on those indices that affect you and I. That's the moment. Stay with us.
Welcome back. So we started off the show by, zeroing in on the need for accountability, and why not ask critical questions in that regard about the economy, particularly now that there seems to be, an agreement with stakeholders about Nigeria's tax reforms bills. So we're going to be speaking to some stakeholders about whether or not it is uhuru for the tax reform bills. Will they still be encountering opposition as the public hearing commences? Joining us for this very important conversation is the DG, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, Mr. Adewale Smart Oyeride, who joins us here in our Lagos studio. Thank you for joining us, sir. Good morning.
Thank you for having us once again.
We also have with us Mr. Aziz Alatoye. He's a vice chairman, CITN, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Taxation Standards and Practice Monitoring Committee of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, who joins us virtually from Lagos. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all Nigerians.
Thank you, sir. So I'll naturally start with you, Mr. Smart Oyeride. Before we begin to talk about the public hearing and what we may be getting from manufacturers and employers, let's reflect, first of all, on the GDP growth rate as announced by the National Bureau of Statistics. What is the position of NECA on this one?
Thank you once again. I think the NBC has faced some bashing of recent, starting from the issue of the unemployment rate, the basing or calculation of unemployment rate using the new international standards, which tends from some surface view, we can communicate that unemployment rate is reducing, but in the real context, it's not communicating that, basically, because the new model of calculating those statistics have changed internationally. So they've received a bit of bashing, and that also trickles down to the issue of the rebasing of the GDP, as it were, and then the new GDP rate. Now the NBC's role is to pick the items.
Yes, the NBS.
NBS, pardon me, is to pick the items and then do the calculation and then project from their calculation, from the 1 + 1 + 2 + 3, x + y has given us this figure. It has done its bit. But in the real sense, if you look at it generally, has it really improved? Those are the key conversations that stakeholders are having. Within the context of the figures and the reality on ground, there's a bit of disconnect, which remain a concern for general stakeholders. As the NBC, MBS, and Bureau of Statistics has done its job, absolutely it's done its job. For us on the shop floor, for us the operators, has it really translated into real growth that we see? We probably will say no. Now, there's another context to it. If you look at where we're coming from, someone said if you find yourself in the hole, the first thing you stop doing is you stop digging. So when you stop digging, and you are trying to mop up yourself from the hole back to zero level, you are growing, but your growth is not visible. It's not real growth in the real context, but you are moving out of the hole. Until you get to zero level, ground zero, that's when we can now say progressively you are growing and your growth is now feasible. But while you are in the hole and trying to dig yourself out, are you growing? Absolutely, you are growing. So that might be the context in which the growth that we are currently experiencing it can be explained somehow, but in the real sense, in the real context of growth, in the real context of inflation rate coming down, then you go to the market, is the price of goods and services, is it coming down? Absolutely not. But are we moving in the right direction? We think we are.
Okay, we're still in the hole, but we're trying to come out of the hole.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Let me bring the same to you, Mr. Alatoye. Particularly some of the indicators of the growth as identified by the NBS. Oil sector dropping from 12% to, I think, is it 4% now? And of course, the service sector contributing significantly to the growth that we're witnessing. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, thanks very much. And again, good morning, all Nigerians. So as the DG, had said, and let me expatiate, a little bit. There is a difference between growth, and movement in terms of the real growth. For instance, if in the oil industry, for example, if we say there is a growth in that industry, what do we really mean by that growth? Nigeria has about 2.5 million barrels that we are supposed to do according to OPEC. And we are doing about 1.8 million. So at a point in time, we dropped to about 900, came to 1.3 million, 1.6, and now 1.8 or thereabouts. If we've done 1.9, we will say, we have produced more. But have we even reached our OPEC quota? The answer is no. So the growth that we planned in the past was to move 2.5 million barrels to 4 million barrels. So if we, in real time, we want to say, as Nigerian, we are growing from what we planned before, will be if we cross the 2.5 million barrels, in that industry. And this same is applicable to all other industries. We had a plan before where we are supposed to be, and we are not, in that place. So we are still moving within the band of what we planned to be several years ago. So, and that is why I'm saying, yes, there is movement, based on the statistics we have. But whether those statistics are up to where we are supposed to be is a different ball game entirely.
Mr. Very smart. Let's leave the GDP and the rest for a moment and come to the issue of tax, because I'm sure in the coming days the numbers will still be crunched, but we needed your responses as to, because that's the latest data from the MBS that measures all of these things. So
absolutely.
We've had stakeholders meeting and hearing at that hearing at the National Assembly as far as the tax reforms are concerned. It looks like there's a lot of progress, but one of the things I want to find out from you is when you look at those four bills, especially the first two, by that I mean the Nigerian tax bill and the Nigerian tax administration bill, from the point of an operator, what is missing that must be added before we can make progress? The last time we had a conversation, the permutation the governors did, they left off the CIT, say leave everything they don't reduce the CIT, leave it the way it is. So what are you looking forward to as far as this bill is concerned?
Thank you once again. I think first of all, the committee itself, the presidential committee, the organized private sector was represented in the committee. Were represented by the secretariat of the OPS then. So the context and the scope of the whole work that was done by the committee, progressively we made significant input. And up to the whole consultation. In fact, in my adult life, I can remember, I think this is probably an item that has witnessed the largest of consultation. I've not seen any other conversation we've had in this country that witnessed this kind of wide, deep, and expansive consultation. So for us, it's more of what can you get in the context of the stakeholder engagement. What more can I get? How can I reduce my burden? So when the governors are saying the company income tax should be left and then the VAT should be increased for them, everybody is just trying to get what more can I get? What more relief can I get? What more burden can be taken off me within the context of this issue? But for us, I think significantly, once it is human, once the context involves human in any endeavor, you cannot expect a perfect outcome. So the context of us, if the CTN can still be reduced, if more reliefs can still be given to organized businesses and light and self-interest, absolutely right. But for us, as far as this bill is concerned, it significantly addressed the critical issues, different from where we are coming from. You know, when we say businesses are paying over 60, 70, 90 taxes, levies, and fees across board in 3 tiers of government, sometimes people think it's just statistics. That is the reality of it from research. So if this bill can significantly harmonize and reduce that multiplicity of taxes, then it will have done done a great deal for all of us. One thing that we wish it can do more is to create a system where no levies can come in from the back door. Let me give you an instance. While we are still dealing with this issue of the tax bill, and we are still trying to harmonize the levies, harmonize all the things, you still have agencies of government still coming from the back door, still coming up with levies. We talk about the customs 4% for FOB levy. We talk about the Financial Reporting Council levies. So those are out of the context of this bill, even why this conversation is going on. So those levies are still finding their way. One agency saying, look, I have the right to
the MPA.
Exactly, I have the right to do this, I have the right to, which basically negates the whole idea of harmonizing fees, levies, and taxes.
Mr. Alonso, I would like you to pick up from perhaps where he stopped. And I've looked at the bill, like all 4 of them, some part of it, and I've looked at also the explanation, quite lucidly explained by the leader of that team, trying to do his work as much as possible. But the concern has always been, we don't have a problem with pieces of legislation. Implementation is always the big headache. He's pointed out this 60 levies, harmonization. And sometimes when we look at some of the things that they said they will address, when you look at implementation, what do you see, Mr. Alatoye?
Question. Firstly, let me join Mr. Adewale in appreciating the committee for a very comprehensive review of the Nigerian tax laws, and also an attempt to unify the tax law. I think that's a very great one. Also, reducing about 62 taxes to under 10 taxes, as we have it now. I think that's a very great idea. However, we need to put a yardstick for the measurement of performance. And after the tax bill is passed into law, 3 things are likely going to happen. And that's number 1 is that we have growth in the economy, growth of both the companies as well as individuals in terms of moving individuals from poverty to prosperity as a result of this law. The second possible option is for us to have stagnation, meaning that we still remain within the bracket of where we are. And the third possible one is actually to have a retardation, which we don't pray for, and that is that things will really go down than the way it was. I think the general expectation is that we are likely going to have growth, from these bills, the 4 bills, put together. We are likely going to have growth. However, it has to be all inclusive. There are some other areas, that we need to look at. I think I've been enumerating the areas which are very fantastic, fine, which the committee, has done. There are some other areas we need to look into. And let me just pick 1 or 2 of them. For instance, we used to have a free trade zone, which technically has been, like abolished by this law, except just, some few things there. If we abolish that, we need to look at how it's going to impact in that industry. Probably have more dialogue, with the special economic zone as it were, and see how probably can still be having some FDI into that zone by having discussion with them. The second one probably we want to look at is the oil industry again. If you look at chapter 3 there, in section 77, that talks about filing of tax returns, on account of equity. You give a license to a Nigerian, and foreign persons are funding that, and those who are funding are not going to be filing returns. It is the person who is having the license by way of equity that is going to be filing the returns as against the economic, basis of filing returns before. This is likely going to impact negatively. And so we need to look at these areas and see how, at the end of the day, we don't have either retardation in some sectors or retrogression in some sectors, whereas we would definitely have growth in some sectors. Right. The other one we need to look at probably is the sector. So, which means that we need to look at the education sector very critically instead of taxing education sector, because we are going again to health. Right. If we tax education sector, I don't really think that probably will be a nice thing, and we have to review that as well.
I just want to do a quick follow-up, because I understand the VAT for now is 7.5. Some have said let it stay at 7.5, but the goal, at least for government, is to have that incremental plan till 2030 to about, what is it, 15% now. But my challenge is today, if you go to some places to purchase things, you get 7.5 VAT and consumption tax of 5%. So in some way, people are paying 12.5%. So I wanted to ask you, Mr. Alatoye, how does that work? Because what you find now is a lot of people turn back. I was at a business recently, and people heard 7.5%, another 5%. Say, I don't want it again.
Service charge.
Exactly. Yeah. What's going on there, Mr. Alatoye?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the challenges that we are having, which I believe this the Senate committee, the Senate needs to look into critically. This fund is coming from only one purse. That is income tax on one side, VAT, value-added tax, and consumption tax from the other side. We might say, oh, yes, there are different taxes. For instance, if I have, 100,000 naira as my monthly pay, now you remove PAYE, that is pay as you earn tax, you remove that from it. So whatever rate is, let's say is 20 that you have removed, it means I have 18 naira left. Now from that 18 naira, I'm going to the market, I'm also going to pay 7.5, on that. You remove another 7.5 from it. It brings it down to 72 or thereabout. Again, you also deduct 5 naira again on the consumption tax. It brings it down to 65 or that. So you keep on deducting. What the masses are saying is that, fine, if you want to increase value-added tax from even 7.5 to 10%, reduce the income tax, because it's the same person that is paying the personal income tax as well as the value-added tax. That is the point of convergence. And it's been said over the years that, look, the indirect tax is the way to go, which is the value-added tax. Everybody understand, that is fine. But meanwhile, you have to reduce the income tax. You can't keep the income tax as the level it is, and then you're also increasing the value-added tax. It's going to reduce the purchasing power of individuals as well as businesses that are supposed to bear those taxes. And that is the challenge that everybody is facing, and that is why people are revolting. Even those are the aspects that people do not really like, just as you have clearly said. It really, depreciates the purchasing power of the masses.
Let me take this to Mr. Smarter, and I thank you, Mr. Latte, for that. So this is where we find ourselves. And that's why a lot of people have called for this tax reform, saying that it should maybe sanitize the system. Because you realize that aside the unofficial taxes you're paying, even the official taxes seem to be too burdensome. And I just gave the example of the, the business I was at, and I saw people saying, I'm not going to purchase this thing again because of the extra taxes. So I imagine what that does eventually to the business, who is a business to make profit, but sadly, because of the taxes, people are not purchasing items. So you are also a part of this whole process. And I wonder for you, and we've asked time and again, what will be the most acceptable? Because there are now proposals from here and there. There'll be a lot of presentations. But what will be the most acceptable and most practicable for you as business owners and employers?
Now, it's a chain reaction. What is acceptable to us should also, on the long run, fuel into growth, into national growth. We cannot cut our nose to spite our face, and that is predominantly what we currently do. And someone has said, rightly so, that you cannot tax people into prosperity. You cannot overtax your citizens because you want to make revenue. Because the more of their disposable income you collect, the less the ability to buy. The lesser the ability to buy, the lesser the ability of the business to sell. The lesser the ability of the business to sell, the lesser its ability to create jobs. And the lesser its ability to create jobs, the more you fuel unemployment. The more you fuel unemployment, the more you fuel insecurity. The more you fuel insecurity, as Britain has done recently, the more you want to increase your budget for security spending. And the more you want to increase your budget for, it's a chain reaction.
The more you now tax the people.
Absolutely. So the best thing for us is this. Those multiplicities, we have challenges at the point, VAT, and consumption tax. To a large extent, they are basically the same thing. You are paying for the same thing. You are taking 7.5 legally. You are taking 5%. Pardon my, I'm not a legal luminary, but you are taking 5% illegally. In fact, you are harassing people to pay 5%.
That's actually what it feels
exactly. Like. So where are we going? And we keep talking about let's harmonize these taxes, let's harmonize these levies, let's harmonize these fees. Those ones that we see, basically, as the ones we have mentioned, are the ones you see, the one you can quote, the one you can put a legal receipt to. By the time you drive from here to Shagamu, you can imagine how many junctions you see where local government towers become block the road.
And they have some police to it as well.
It's more of whether you pay or you are not living. And because you just have to go, you keep parting with those 20 naira, 20 naira? You keep parting with those 200 naira, 500, those 1,000. And then where will all those costs go? They go back to the production cost, which invariably increases the cost of production. And then it goes back to the consumer, because the consumer will always be the one to bear the brunt of all these things. So we are killing those that we are proposing to save if we don't address these issues. And as he said, pardon me, my last comment here. As he said, the biggest challenge in all this conversation, the public hearing will come and go, the bill will be passed. The biggest challenge we all face is implementation. And we just hope that the presidential committee will not be disbanded after the whole bill, but they must create a rule for them to midwife implementation. If not, like a very high-ranking government head of agency said about 2 years ago when we ran the Employers Summit, he said, look, he just doesn't understand how we are like this. A lot of things have been put in place to make life easier for us, but you have individuals that have also proposed that, look, these things will not work. So those are the critical issues that government have to deal with, issue of implementation.
And that is very grim, I was listening to the list of the long taxes that Nigerians have been subjected to. Don't forget the bank charges as well.
Absolutely.
All of those levies that we are subjected to paying. And of course, the increase in telecommunication service. Some would say it's another indirect form of taxation. But let's make progress on the conversation. What got us to this seeming consensus is the final agreement by the Governors Forum on sharing formula for VAT, 50% based on equality, 30% on derivation, 20% on population. What does this portend for that call at the beginning of this debate on tax reforms for economic viability, particularly for those states that do not particularly have industrial activity to generate a sizable quantum of VAT? That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, is this an end to that legal contention on, the collection of VAT being a subnational responsibility? I'm starting with you, Mr. Smart-Oyerinde.
Let's say your last question. Let's believe that the agreement or consensus will have put laid to rest the issue of who should collect, how it should be distributed. I think they eventually arrived at a consensus. It was all about how much more can we get, how much more can we squeeze around, and let's assume that has been resolved significantly. But the fundamental issue you raised of the first question, which was, pardon me, can you repeat, please, the first part of your question?
The agreement on 50% equality, 30% on...
and then the viability of the state.
Yeah.
Now, there was a conversation about increasing the states to creating another 31 states at a point, which I really want us to go through, because for us, the argument is neither here nor there. But it would not take away the issue of revenue. VAT is what we collect. It's still more of collecting and sharing, taking from the consumers, taking from the populace. I think there should be some level of citizens' inquiry, subnational, citizens at the subnational level, holding leadership at that level to accountability. I think we should move progressively away from the campaign of I will do this, I will do that, to how exactly are you going to do it. Hardly will you find a state in this country that is not endowed with one mineral or the other. Hardly will you find a state in this country that is not endowed with one resources or the other. And I think it's high time that citizens of those states start holding leadership to account, to say, look, how are you going to maximize these resources? This rent-seeking process that we've lived off, everybody going to Abuja, every month for allocation to share. I think we should progressively move away from that, and that conversation should start from the state, from the citizens of the state, to say what exactly are you bringing on board beyond what you are going to collect in Abuja.
Indeed. So we started with accountability, and it seems we're ending with accountability. We want to thank you so much. Mr. Adewale Smart-Oyerinde is the Director General, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, who has joined us here in our Lagos studio. And we've also had Mr. Aziz Alatoye, is the Vice Chairman, CITN Taxation Standards and Practice Monitoring Committee of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, who joined us virtually. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And we're not quite done with our questions on accountability. This time around, we'll be asking those questions in another way, in another sector. It's about food, the food on your table. So stay with us, we'll be right back.
Well, let's talk about the all-important subject of food. I mean, what's a breakfast show without food, right? But what is the cost of that food? Where do we begin to reverse the skyrocketing prices of food, really? Because it looks like it's becoming oblivious to the pockets of people. It's just going high and high, regardless of the fact that salaries and wages aren't climbing as fast as that. And we're joined on the program this morning by Professor of Agricultural Economics, President of Farm and Infrastructure Foundation, Professor Bolagade Ayola. Good morning, Prof. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning.
So looking at the new regime of inflation figures, and I choose to use that word carefully, we see that food inflation is now 26% with the rebased inflation figures or CPI figures, and that's from the 39% it used to be. That doesn't change the fact that, in fact, the food prices, even increased, as it were, in some areas. So the numbers rebased doesn't mean that it reduced. First, I'd like you to speak to those figures, because it might be tricky for those who are just looking at the numbers, seeing, it was almost 40%. Now, it's 26%. Things are getting better. Prof, is that a reflection of the reality for you?
Thank you very much. We need to be a little cautious in interpreting data that come from the experts. We have actually not reached the stage of comparison. Comparison intertemporal is a little unearly. For example, the basis upon which it was 39% before is different from the basis upon which they are saying it is 26%. Therefore, it's like comparing oranges and apples. They are not the same thing. And if we do so, we will miss the message of what pricing is all about. I am sure it is a concern for the recent rebasing by the National Bureau of Statistics that is making this topic so topical. But something had happened that the majority of the people have not captured in the process. And that is, rebasing has taken place. Rebasing means that the basis upon which you calculated before or you were used to calculating before had changed in January. December and before, it was different. Therefore, if you want to compare and say it is rising or it is reducing, we need another set of data before we can do that. For example, in January that we are being told is about 26%, we dare not compare it with December because they are different things. But we can compare it with February, March, April, when the current rebasing yardsticks see operate. So the National Bureau of Statistics have not actually finished its job before throwing this into the public domain for their own intuitive reasoning and analysis. So as of now, it's impossible practically to answer the question whether the prices are rising or they are reducing, because we cannot compare what happened in January with what happened before January yet.
But you know,
I'm not saying it's not comparable,
yeah,
but very soon we'll be in a position to do so.
Well,
So
Prof, we
right
can
now,
always
we
look
don't
at
have
our
sufficient
pockets.
information.
Indeed, but for every Nigerian, they can look at their pockets, look at the prices in the market, and can tell that these prices are not dropping. I think it's very easy for them. They know how much they used to spend on maybe a bucket of Gary, for those who can afford that much, in maybe November.
You are correct about that.
Exactly.
Yeah. It is something, you know, price mechanism is a moving target. We talk of price stability or price equilibrium, otherwise also known as market equilibrium. That is when prices have interacted across commodities, across spaces, to give peace to the mind of those who are using the prices to make a living, to buy this or to sell that. Now, some trigger factors bring disequilibrium sometime, and it is that disequilibrium that government comes in with appropriate policy to restabilize, to reestablish the equilibrium. If that is based on the calculations of NBS, presently, the point I'm making is that we miss the point. There are two instruments that are at work. One is the empirical estimates of the National Bureau of Statistics. The other is what you have just alluded to. Every human being going to market has an innate capacity to determine whether the price regime is increasing or is decreasing. If that is the one we are saying is only experiential by individuals, we cannot aggregate the feelings of so many people, thousands of people, and then conclude that it's rising or not. Because many factors are at play. For example, before I say that food price has increased compared to the past, I must make reference to where am I buying that product? Is it in the same place I bought it before? Is it the market? Is it the farm market, okay, which we call farm gate, where I'm buying it, where farmers or marketers have not added their own value? Is it in the dry season or the rainy season, and so on? All these come to play in the factor of rising and falling of prices. So I am perfectly in agreement with you that individuals who have money in their pocket are capable of evaluating the rise and fall, but we are not capable, based on that, to aggregate for everybody, because you cannot even assemble everybody. So we need to be a little patient with the figure, with the empirical method, which the NBS will continue to supply us before we can make that comparison. But my sense is this. My sense is that because we suffered a recent disequilibrium in the market for food, triggered by petroleum subsidy withdrawal, triggered by transportation costs, triggered by other factors, we tend naturally to feel that these things are still continuing to drive prices. Yes, as an individual, you have the freedom to do that, but you can't aggregate it for everybody.
All right, Prof. We're also expecting, perhaps by the beginning of the second quarter, we should be able to see perhaps a rebase of the GDP in itself. But the numbers that were released yesterday by the MBS showing that fourth quarter we grew by 3.8 or so. So in the year 2024, it's about 3.4%. But I'm looking at the numbers here saying overall annual growth of the sector in agricultural sector, which is the conversation we're having, stood at 1.19% in 2024 compared to 1.13%. So there's an appreciation, but it's marginal. You also look at the overall contribution of the sector in 2024 relative to 2023, 24%, 24.6% to 25.1%. If you look closely at those numbers, even though agriculture has stayed consistent, even in the agriculture, if you break it down out of livestock, crop production, fishery and forestry, crop production is the leader with about 90%. Even if it's the biggest contributor to the GDP, but year on year, quarter on quarter, relative year to relative year, the appreciation is marginally low. What do we do to scale up those numbers?
You have changed from our previous topic of price instability to GDP differences. GDP, we have not been told it has been rebased.
Yeah, we know.
And traditionally, different sectors contribute differently to GDP. It depends on the volume of the food and other items in the basket that we are using to measure the GDP. It is indeed reasonable to expect that with some destabilization of market equilibrium in the food market we experienced up till last year at least, shares are becoming changed in the basket of goods and services constituting GDP. GDP of agriculture, GDP of livestock, GDP of the mineral sector, and so on. They are adjusting to the equilibrium changes within that period, and they will remain so until they rebase and put them on the same standard scale all over again.
So, Prof, let's head into the market now and really look at the pricing of certain food commodities. The price of a bag of rice has never been the same again, particularly from about last year, still hovering above 100,000 naira. We just need an explainer of why it's not coming down, because we have a rice mill in Lagos, we have a rice mill in Kebbi, we have rice mills in some other, eastern parts of the country. The price of palm oil is also skyrocketing by about 120%. What we used to get for about 5,000 naira is now shooting above 13,000 naira. But the price of beans has come down a bit, particularly in the last month or so. Can you do an explainer for us for why we haven't and may not be able to recover from the price of certain commodities, and why some are coming down? And for those coming down, will they stay that way, or are they bound to go up again, particularly as we approach Ramadan? We just want to know whether the reasons for these increases that we're witnessing are artificial, or they are organic, in line with the economic situation that we find ourselves in.
Simple. It is a matter of seasonality of agriculture. Agriculture is different from so many other commodities. You made reference to a number of agricultural commodities that are based on seasons in their production cycles. Oil palm, almost everywhere in the oil palm belt of this country, we are just beginning to harvest the bunches and process fruits. So within that period, there's a temporary scarcity in the market, and that will reflect in the price you will buy it right now. But just wait a little bit into the season we call Ifo season down in the southwest. That is the season when everybody is harvesting, everybody is processing, and large volumes of palm oil go to the market. Then it will reflect in the price to be coming down. But right now, you will still be watching the upward treatment. The same thing for cassava, the same thing for plantain. Plantain will not, is drying out now. And until new harvesting season begin around October and so on, that price reversal you are expecting, or price stability you are expecting for a period of time, will not take place. So you cannot take seasonality for granted for agricultural products, specifically food products. We are probably eating the same volume of food, but many factors interplay at different points in time. That is seasonality. Like seasonality, other factors like even foreign exchange, because we use importation to augment the internal production, notwithstanding how many factories are in Lagos for rice and so on. We still import rice. So if something happens in the exchange market, foreign exchange market, that destabilizes the volume that coming through that for augmentation purposes, we will observe it in the volume available in the market, and by implication in the price at which we continue to buy it. The issue there goes beyond mechanistic calculations of this nature. It goes into the regime of policy making in the food market and policy implementation in the food market. We are not blessed with consistent, stable, and effective policies to deal with seasonality, variability, and such other disequilibrium factors in this country. And that is why my own organization feels that until we cure instability of that nature, until we cure policy impunity, what makes policy not to work during implementation, to stabilize, to help us keep what we have in excess during harvest and spread it over during lean season, And therefore, stabilizing prices is a matter of policy. It's not a matter of production itself. We are still producing, even when you consider what happens in the northeast, in the northwest, Boko Haram and all that. This country is still producing enough that we can eat and eat well.
But quite important point
policy environment is not right.
The policy environment, and I think that's a great place to anchor. We need to be more agriculture friendly. There needs to be some sort of rebate for people who want to purchase land for farming and all of that. But we have to thank you so much. We've been speaking with Professor Gbolagade Ayola, President of Farm and Infrastructure Foundation, also Professor of Agricultural Economics. Thank you for your time, Prof.
My pleasure always. Thank you, Janice.
So there you have it. We've touched on the very important topic of food. But when your belly is full, what's next? Work. But what is the value or quality of skills that we have available now, and how can you improve on it? Well, someone joins us to have a discussion, so please stay with us.
All right, from all the conversation around numbers, inflation, food, well, something that has to do with how we put food on our table, but this time it has to do with skills and entrepreneurship. Joining us is the chairman of the board, I Train Africa, Aderinshola Adio Adepoju, joining us right here in our Lagos City. Welcome, madam, to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
When we have women, there's a broad spectrum of question because we're he for she's. I'm looking forward to one woman that will contest for Nigeria's president. I will support her someday, because men brought us here. Whatever we're dealing with, men brought us here. So that's why we celebrate women as much as we can. From where you sit and what you do, walk us through what are the gaps you've experienced or seen within that space, and now you're closing it.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. So first, I would say that, you know, when you start something from a personal pain point, you would understand how it feels. So I was on my PhD program, and I had to go to the UK to go and do a part of my research, and I realized that I was very brilliant, schooled, but again, in terms of doing the actual work beyond the research, which was my area of focus in chemistry, I lacked the skills to then, you know, support the output of the work, the presentation of the work. And I realized that someone else in my field that was doing lesser than I was doing, but had presentation skills and all those skills to support the work, was going to be shining. And I was like, okay, what is happening here? You are doing more work, but you are having less output. And I realized that that was not just about me. Like, this was like a general problem in Africa, where we were not looking to, we were just looking to go to school, but not actually think about what exactly education is when it comes to the 21st century. What is education? It should meet the need of the workforce. And we realized that there was so many information online, but the information was not translating to people being skilled. Because you hear, oh, there's soft skills, there's this, that, and you go on Google, you read it, and there is still nothing. Like, it doesn't translate to you having the skills that the employer of labor is demanding, or whether it is the skills for you to do research in the academic sector, or even the skills to run your business properly. So this foundational skills that everybody needs, and part of it is digital literacy, was lacking in almost everyone. And this was not about the level of education, because if it was, everybody that has gone to school will be employed. But every employer of labor is complaining about the same thing. People don't have skills to work. So it was beyond just saying quality education, SDG 4. It was not like, what exactly does quality mean? Simply put, it must meet the need of the workforce if it must drive the economic growth in Africa.
So digital skill.
Yeah, digital skills, but you know, that's the funny thing. I had to develop a curriculum across 3 years. And why am I saying that? I realized that because I realized there was no information about what those skills are, I then had to go on research and say, what should we even call them? So I call them workplace foundational skills, because under that umbrella, then we have digital skills, we have the soft skills, we have the life skills, and we have basic tech skills. How do I mean? It doesn't matter if you are doing tech or not. You will need to be able to create things like Gantt charts, which like you use in organizing a basic project, which would be like a project just that you are handling, not because you're a project manager.
Chart is,
exactly.
So you can explain.
So a Gantt chart is something like you are trying to do like a project. Let me give an example of a project, a webinar. You want to organize a webinar. You want to organize an online seminar. It is a project. So it will have timelines. So it is not until you're a project manager before you're organizing a webinar for your business. But then you're organizing it and you're realizing that you're not meeting timelines because why? The basic on how to use a Gantt chart to say, this is what I want to do, this is the time I want to do it, this is how it should run, this is who is on the project, which will be basic for everybody that is doing any form of work at all. That's why I used an example of a webinar. These days, even it's like one person business will say, oh, I want to organize an online webinar. If you want to organize an online webinar, which is a basic project, you want to do a flyer and say, oh, this is this thing. It means you should know how to use Canva, which is basic, which is a digital software to do basic design. Or you want to organize a webinar, it means you are going to have to present something there, which means you need to know how to do presentation slides, which you have to do on Google Slide or Canva. So those things were foundational. It doesn't matter the industry. So I had to then spend 3 years in developing a curriculum to even gather it. And because of my wide range of experience, I'd taught at university for about 2 years. I'd been an entrepreneur for like 15 years. And I'd also worked professionally at UN Live, which is Museum for United Nations, remotely in Nigeria. So I realized what employers were asking for internationally. I also realized what was lacking in the academics because I was in the classroom. So this was like firsthand. I know what is lacking in this curriculum. Like there's a wide gap. Education does not equal employability. Like that was just the gap there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether you're also looking into other spaces that are a bit close to digital, but not necessarily digital, which is even without research, at a glance, you can see that, you know, the expatriates are the one taking up much of the lucrative jobs in this space, i.e., you know, the engineering fields, which we see a lot of foreign companies providing intervention and less of the indigenous companies. Automated processes in industries, you find that there's a high demand for expatriates, you know, to operate those processes, and you do not see a lot of our own people there. What do you identify as the challenge in this skills gap? You know, is it what we've known age long as the disconnect between the town and the gown? And, you know, what interventions are you offering in this space?
Okay, thank you very much. So here's the thing. I think when I had the privilege of working at UN Live, we would need to hire someone out of Africa. I realized that, and this is just me having to look at the truth. An average African or Nigerian would not be early to this thing. And those are part of the foundational things. And the way they work there, like when they say a meeting is 10 o'clock, they add it to your calendar. You should show up at 10 o'clock. But an average African, when they walk into a meeting at 10:02, and they don't even see there's something wrong. So beyond, like, there are a lot of people that are having technical skills right now. They have the technical skills, they can do the AI, they can do all the machine learning and everything, but they can still be hired internationally. Why? And that is why we had to then design something at iTrain Africa, which is as a Skilled for Work Academy. We said, you know what? You would go to an interview, you qualify technically, like you are being interviewed for a remote job, but at the end of the day, they tell you, you know, you can go. So what I have realized is the fact that even if we are doing a lot of technical trainings, people are doing the coding, they are doing this thing, there is still the gap of the foundational skills. So when people go to interview, they are asking you something like, oh, if you had to go to, we had to do something, and how will you do this? Maybe add something about calendar. And the person goes on and on explaining their coding. But because those people, they realize that no matter the level of technicality you have, if you cannot comply with the work ethics, with the other things that are not necessarily your area of expertise, they won't hire you. They wouldn't hire you. And I realized that when I was at UN Live, I think I was the only black, you know, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I was the only black this thing. Why? One of the first things they asked me at my interview was, have you worked internationally before? And I understood that question because, again, I've been in that space for a while. And I understood what they were not, it was not about my international experience. It was about me understanding the work ethic that is demanded in that space. Not that I'll be working remotely in Nigeria and they can't just reach me.
And
like,
wherever you are, there are certain skills that are just basic.
They're just basic.
That just come to
so
play.
It is not about us not having the skill, like the technical skills, that they're not hiring us internationally. It is about us not having the work ethic that is demanded internationally.
And we have to give it to a lot of people who, in spite of the, perhaps you call it stereotype or proven fact, they're still able to transcend all of that and deliver on the jobs. My dad did something when we were young to help us combat this African timing thing. Every clock in the house was 30 minutes fast.
Oh, wow.
So he was even doing it. Sometimes he would change it to 45 minutes. So you can't just make sure you're out of the house once you see the time is almost that. And I think that helped to inculcate that habit of getting to places early. So maybe parents might want to do that, switch your time to 30 minutes fast. But I hear that people call you the clarity king, right? I really don't know what that means, but I imagine clarity, you help provide clarity. And I think one of the challenges people have in this part of the world is just figuring life out. What am I meant to do? Am I meant to do this? Okay, I've gotten a job, but I'm not really happy in the job, but it's paying me, even though I'm frustrated. So a lot of people need clarity, and they just want to ensure that they don't get burnt in the process, so they follow their passion. And their passion ends up giving their passion. If you're a Yoruba person, that's whooping. So how can you get clarity as a young Nigerian?
I think, why do they call me Clarity King? It's because there is no program we have at the academy that doesn't start with clarity model. And again, there is something I would typically say in everywhere I go. I say, no matter how fast you race in the wrong direction, you will never arrive at your destination. You could get a Formula One and be saying, oh, I want to go to Abeokuta. But even if you're racing to Abeokuta, if that is not your destination, you would arrive there, but it's not where you are going. So I feel like, and that is the problem of most people now. You see, business analysis, they are doing cybersecurity, they are doing everything because they've heard that they need to upskill. That is like a thing now, you need to upskill. But many people are not clear on the courses they are taking, how it's going to then translate to their upgrade or their upskill. So what we then did at iTrain Africa was to first introduce what we call the clarity model. I think that's probably the most unique model. I don't think I've seen any other curriculum or academy have that in their curriculums. So the clarity model, we typically have 3 major things, which is first about the mindsets. Because look, if you teach somebody a skill from today to tomorrow, if their mindset is not ready to learn, you're just wasting your time. So we would do like a mindset lesson, then we will do what we call a personality test. A personality test is like the one we typically use at the academy is 16 personalities. It is free. So in those 16 personality tests, it simply highlights it are your weaknesses, and most of the time, it's 90% accurate. So people then realize, oh, I don't like numbers, or I won't do well in a profession that has numbers. Then why are you upskilling in business analysis? Why are you upskilling in data analysis? So by the time they come to the academy, and those clarity modules are typically incorporated in the foundational one, which is for everybody. Not that, because at our academy, we have the soft skills core, we have the technical skills core, then we have the internship for experience, which is like an holistic approach to this job gap. So at the very beginning, the first thing you would do is that clarity. So before you even pay us for like a project management course, you are very certain it is aligning with your destiny. So that way we realize that there's a higher completion rate of our programs, because when you are very clear about how this impacts you, then you are willing to put in the work.
All right.
That clarity is very key before we go on a journey.
I guess that's what HR calls matching interest and skill. Yeah. That's what they call. When you come to HR, that's one of the things they try to marry. You may want to be a fighter, but you don't have strength.
You don't have the strength, so don't waste your energy.
All right. Shola Adio Adepoju is the chairman of the board, iTrain Africa. Thank you so much for coming on the program, for bringing clarity to
Thank you so much for having me.
Listen. All right, we'll take a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll talk about the very unique story you will not like to miss. Join us again.
Welcome back. So we head on to the next segment of the program, which is just as important as the others. I heard someone say yesterday that adversity is a very big part of human experience. And until we become proactive rather than reactive to situations, then we may continue to be under rather than above. So somebody who has heads above water this morning, despite a very profound experience, is our guest to inspire you. Perhaps you are at that particular stage of your life. So welcome Emonena Akwara, a stroke survivor and founder, My Ability in Disability Foundation. She's right here in our Lagos studio.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Emonena. Did I get your name correctly?
Yes, but you can call me Enna.
Enna.
Yes.
Beautiful. What does it mean, by the way?
It means that, okay, so these are the children, yes.
These are the children?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about your experience. You were diagnosed at 23?
Yes.
That was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And here you are today. Yeah. Walk us through the diagnosis, because that's a critical stage, and how you were able to handle it, how it impacted on family at that time.
Okay. I remember clearly the day that I fell down and the happenings before that day. So before then, I went to the hospital. I mean, I knew something was wrong with me. Now, I went for tests and they told me I had anemia. I had an infection that was killing my red blood cells by my white blood cells. Right? Then I had DVT, deep vein thrombosis. Right, it was so painful. My legs were swollen. I mean, I couldn't sleep at night. I was always crying. Right. Then the day that I had a stroke, I went to the hospital again. They gave me a particular drug, warfarin, and the first day I took that drug, that was the day that I had the stroke. Now, I had an infection in my heart, but they didn't see it because they didn't check, right? It's called endocardiasis. I wasn't thinking about anything. You know how people say, well, somebody has a stroke and they say, what were you thinking about? No, I was the healthiest version of myself, right? And I fell down on that particular day and it was a stroke. Now, my family took me back to the hospital and they didn't know what was wrong with me, you know. Then I slept there all night. Now, when somebody has a stroke, right, we have a timeline, 4.5 hours to, you know, get proper medical attention. If not, you die or you have permanent disability. Now, the next day, my cousins came to take me from that hospital. They took me to 2 other hospitals that rejected me because they didn't want an addition to their death rates. Right? They took me to another hospital that said, okay, they didn't have a bed, but they did a diagnosis. Like they told me, my family, that I had a stroke. And they referred my family to another hospital where I took my treatment. Right? It was hard. I mean, me talking to you is a miracle because then I couldn't speak, couldn't walk. My right body was shrinking so bad. In fact, I forgot everything, including my mom. Now,
memory loss.
Yes, memory loss. Now, my family and friends could see me through, right, with the bills, because honestly, I mean, it was a private hospital, right, not a normal hospital, like big hospital, right, and they were able to clear my bills, right. Now, I remember that I couldn't do anything, right, and I was just, you know, like a vegetable, right. My mom, because I'm the only child of my mom, right, my mom was always thinking that we would like get over it. And guess what? She died 3 years after from chronic kidney disease, right? So all these things that has happened to me, there are a lot, right? I'm just sharing a part of it. Now, the stroke didn't even leave like, oh, you had a stroke, you are recovering. It left a leaky heart valve with me. Now, it means that when your normal heart opens and closes completely.
How to recognize a stroke? You know how to recognize a stroke. Fast is the word. Fast is the word. Fast.
I've decided to share the word, the stroke word. Like, I want to create a stroke-aware nation. So, yeah.
Your story is, I don't even know where to start to ask you the question, because you're young.
Yes, really.
That is, I think that is the very interesting part, if you allow me to use that word, your age. And so walk us through the mindset. Because you're here today because you decided to pick up yourself.
Yeah.
And say, whatever life has thrown at me, let's go. I bet on anything I can get this over and done with. Tell us how you were able to psychologically walk through this and how you're coping right now.
Well, this experience, it has made me stronger. I mean, my husband was just telling me a few days ago that I might be too strong, right? I told myself that I would not allow this to, make me depressed, right? From the day that I fell down, there was a little still voice that was telling me that, hey, you get out of this, you come out even stronger. So I listened to that voice. So I began to fight. I mean, I'm talking right now. Then I couldn't speak. I was speaking like gibberish, right? I started fighting, and every time that I'm about to get sad and depressed, I tell myself that you would get over it and you would do greater things with it. I mean, you're young. How many young people have a stroke? It's rare, right? And how many have the symptom, like the cause? Because mine is very rare. It's called caused by endocarditis. How many people? Because you always hear high blood pressure, right, or pregnancy or something, but you don't hear an infection in the heart, right? So I told myself that I must, even till now, right? Anytime, like, there's nothing that can faze me. I already saw death, and it was staring at me, and I overcame. So nothing. So it made me stronger.
Commendable. Absolutely. And I try to think I'm a strong person, right? Well, listening to your story messed me up really badly. But I'm excited that you're able to turn those things around for good.
Thank you.
Let's establish this. You had a stroke at
23.
23.
Yeah.
The stroke left the right part of your body.
Yeah.
Sort of immobile.
Yes.
If I'm correct. And till today, you still have some sort of that, and you're still thriving with that. Again, I don't know how you were able to surmount all of that, but I want you to now speak to the good side of it.
Yeah.
Right, because I feel terrible. I need something to spark that joy. And the fact that you're smiling and you look so beautiful and radiant, I'm trying to merge it. So what are you doing now with all of that negative story? Again, it was manhandled, rather. They didn't handle it well. It went past the 4 hours of it. So what are you doing about with all of this?
Okay, so I'm sharing the stroke awareness word to companies, schools. In fact, I wrote a book for children, right? It's called Hey, I Spotted a Stroke, right? It has 3 stories, and chapter 4 is like activities, right? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
I'm sure the camera will pick. Give me a copy.
Okay.
Give me a copy from here.
Okay, so this book is so I can teach children about stroke, because most of the time they are the first people to see a stroke happen, either their mom or dad, right? They maybe at the best they cry and everything, but now they know what to do. I want this, this book, right? Because this is my second book. The first book is about my story and 12 other stories. It's called I Almost Died, right? So this book, the intention is get it to underserved communities, right? Because for me, I had a family, I had friends that could contribute and take me out, right? Pay for my physiotherapy. But when a poor man has a stroke, and it's death for them, right? So the thing is, I want to inform all the people that, hey, when you have a stroke, it's not a stigma, right? This is what you do. This is what you can do, right? So apart from sharing distributing this book to underserved communities, I want it to be on curriculums, because there are already activities inside the book, right? That you can even create a test for it, right? And it would be so nice to have stroke taught in primary schools, secondary schools, because I believe that life happens to people because of other people. Life has already happened to me, right? And I want this thing not to happen to you or you or you, right? Because I know how it is. Losing my mom was, in fact, I can't even tell you about it, right? So if this thing goes into curriculum, the north, the south, the west, the east, I mean, my work is done in life, right? So yeah,
Powerful.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. But just
Powerful words.
I don't know what to say. Literally, your strength is charming.
Thank you.
Your strength is shocking. And Bukola,
I want to ask, how are you getting by? Do you do work? How do you make money? How do you?
I have a business. Yes, I have a business called Ben & Luxury. So what we do is rent shortlets, beach houses, boats, cars. No. But before that idea dropped into me, I was suffering. Lagos was happening to me over and over again. In fact, there was one time that I was homeless. Not really like homeless, but I didn't have a house anymore, right? So, I mean, it's a lot. I've gone through a lot in this Lagos, but before I found, and I mean, this call for writing, I mean, that's another one.
brilliant.
Yes.
So besides being a stroke survivor, you're also a, powerful woman who's a real estate agent.
Your kind is rare.
My admiration for you knows no end, honestly.
And I think one of the things she said that I don't want us to lose, just to re-echo, because this book for you, Hey, I Spotted a Stroke, help people save other people, help people avoid it if possible.
And take care of
it's
people.
also to talk to people that are not economically strong. I don't like to use the word poor. Avoid things that can predispose you. Smoking. The rich man, he may survive because of money. Money can solve it. But anyway, but you got to.
Jeffrey, I also felt some anger for the health system.
I don't even want to go there.
Her case was mismanaged. There was also a case of misdiagnosis initially.
Yes.
Well, just for everyone watching to also reflect on that as well. Emonina Aquara, thank you so much for your strength, for your inspiring story, and for helping others to stand.
Thank you.
So Aina has been our guest today. She's a stroke survivor, founder, My Ability in Disability Foundation, and also a real estate powerhouse. We have more inspiration for you coming up after this time out. Stay with us.
Let's now switch gears to talk about rights, but focusing on women and the rights of young people. Being joined in the program by the Executive Director, Advocate for Health and Rights of Women and Youths Initiative, Mr. Emmanuel Etim, joins us right here in our Lagos studio. Mr. Etim, thank you so much for coming on the program. So tell us what you do. Let's begin from there so we can contextualize.
Okay, so what I do, I work with an organization that focuses on supporting the rights of women and youth. We work around health rights. When you look at the issues surrounding gender-based violence and creating awareness and also holding conferences to ensure that women have access to information that can upscale their life from where they are and where they need to be.
So we just spoke to our guest that got literally everybody emotional here. And when we look through the stories, we could pick a few things. One of the things is the sad story of our health sector, and then the negligence. And then if somebody like that comes to you and said, this is how I got here in the first place. Misdiagnosis on one hand, because you're talking about health here.
Yeah.
On the other hand, that word rejecting someone for trying to avoid the tally of deaths on your facility, how do you advance that kind of, how do you prosecute that kind of case?
I mean, I was engaging with her earlier backstage, and her story is so touching. Even hearing it, I mean, we live in a world where people don't even know their rights, right? So it even starts from a place of awareness, where take it out to schools, to organizations, for people to even know their rights. And it's a very long rope, because when you look at rights, even the workplace you have, where you are, there are rights that are accrued to you, just even working there. And taking it back to the health sector, there are a lot of rights, which is why some of the programs we're doing is to ensure that, people know these rights and they know how to demand for their rights, especially when it has to do with your health. So you can imagine a system where you take someone to the hospital and they will expect that they don't want to increase their death rate, so they don't attend to you. And there are laws in Nigeria that, protect citizens to ensure that you can demand for your right, in cases like this.
So was her right trampled upon by that rejection? And this, by the way, a lot of Nigerians, this is the same WhatsApp group that we are, a lot of Nigerians. Like every family can tell you the story of the experience at a hospital or public facility. Was her right trampled upon? It's one thing to know your right and demand for it, right? Mm-hmm. It's another thing for them to give you that right. Mm-hmm. All that one is in constitution. I beg, come on for here. So was it trampled upon? But how do you really demand for your right and get what rightfully belongs to you?
So, I mean, yes, her right was trampled upon, I would say, because first and foremost, that was a wrong diagnosis. And, it took a while, before they now had to find out. And even the time they took her to the hospital. So there are a lot of things that we might be looking into in her case, because what time did they arrive at the hospital, and people need to be aware that you don't wait till your case becomes very critical before you go to the hospital. So you need to seek medical care. And what are the facilities that are available? For instance, I know that Lagos State government, they have some form of HMO that is very subsidized for people that can't really afford the high-end ones, right? So people need to start looking at accessing these things and how they can access them, because really healthcare is supposed to be accessible for everybody, irrespective of your race, gender, and your sexuality.
So now that we've exhausted that part, I'm interested in your own story, and for good reason, because in this patriarchal society that we find ourselves in, it's not often that you find a he for she, not just any he for she, but a he for she who is actively working in the gender rights space. So what's your story? Why are you an active he for she?
Well, my story, I mean, everybody has a story. So I grew up in having an experience where, my dad and my mom, my mom went through terrible stages of gender-based violence, and she was a staff of, she was a civil servant, and, I literally saw several times where my dad would abuse her, and, she lost her life in, after many years, and And you know, the issues of gender-based violence has a lot of impact on women and youth, right? But statistics and based on the work that we do, we see that women are more outspoken, you know, when it has to do with issues of gender-based violence. They are the ones that are quicker to report these issues. So that's why you see that data shows that women go through gender-based violence more. And yes, I agree that women go through, just like you said, because of the society that we find ourselves. There are a lot of stereotypes, you know, and gender-based violence doesn't just happen when a man beats a woman, right? Even social online bullying itself, workplace gender-based violence, you know, not giving women opportunities when they deserve it and when they have earned it, right? So yes, my story came from that. So it's from all of these experiences that I saw growing up as a young boy that I decided to make a difference, to say, you know what, let us stop this, and you know, trying to ensure that because I recognize that there was not enough information, right? Because even the few times I had spoken with my mom and say, why are you still in this marriage? She'll be like, if I leave this marriage, you guys would suffer, right? You know, by the time another woman would come in, the cycle would just keep going on and on and on. And she stayed on through all of that and gave her life for us to ensure that we had a better life today. And you know, these stories are not being heard, these stories are not being told. The work that women put, you know, to ensure that even their families have food on the table, you know, these days. And you know, the community would think a man should be the one providing. But if you look at it now, I'm sorry to say, women provide more these days than actually, you know, the provisions that come from men. So all of these issues are the issues that we're working to address through our work.
Fantastic work. And I'm tempted to ask, first, again, some of people who perpetrate abuse, yes, they know, but maybe it's something that was learned, and they just think this is how to speak to a woman because they probably within their friends or from their parents or the society just nudges them in that direction. Speak to a woman like this, you have to trample on her so that she'll respect you. I don't know if you've ever thought, let me reconcile with my father, forgive him, or have a conversation with him that, do you know how to do this better? I don't know if that's something you ever confronted. But speaking society-wide now, because the work you're doing is to try to reduce the impact of a bigger problem. So have you thought of how to even go deeper into this problem? So we're churning out men who respect women more, men who are able to be he for she's, like yourself.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the things we do in our organization is, you know, we really amplify the bystander syndrome, talk about the bystander syndrome, because we realize that even when men gather, when they're having a drink or something, you know, what are kind of conversations that they have, you know, and we organize conferences to create awareness, and we bring women and men together, you know, to let them understand that this is how to go, right? And we are really big on modeling, right? Men becoming positive role models to even their children, you know, and all of these things, because people learn these things. I personally decided, I'm married, I have a child, but I personally decided to be more, you know, disciplined in that area. I mean, there are instances where you may have, you know, maybe you may feel like, okay, you should raise your hand, but you know that, no, that is not the right thing to do because I have the right information. And from my own personal experiences, you know, and yes, about my dad, yes, we've been having these conversations, and he's now more aware that, okay, this is not the right way, this was not the best thing that I did, you know, at that time. So yeah, so we keep creating this information and creating opportunities for conversations and education. Awareness is one of the biggest things that men can do to speak to their boys. You know, there is no, let's dismantle gender roles, right? You know, when you start thinking that a girl is the one that's supposed to clear the table, wash the dishes, allow your children to have access to all kind of information because it will be useful to them as they grow up.
There's a drive in this generation that is both positive and negative. There's a drive to succeed, but how to succeed is also questionable. There's also the part of understanding consequence, which personally sometimes I weigh before I give you a responsibility, because if you don't understand consequence, even when you fail at doing what you're supposed to do, you don't even understand the consequence of what you've done. What are you doing in that role as far as the male gender specifically is concerned in helping them shape culture? Because all we see is very worrying. So we're complaining about the attitude of some of these Gen Zs. So when Gen Zs become parents, do the maths.
Yeah. So mentorship is one of the things that we also run. We mentor young people. You know, we have mentors that have, people that have gone ahead of them, and we pair them with these people, through 3 to 6 weeks and months program that help to, them to see a positive lifestyle, through these mentorship programs. And we have people from universities, especially those that are about leaving universities and secondary schools, that plug into our mentorship program. And through these programs, they're able to learn, how to navigate through life.
Almost, thank you so much. What you're doing is fundamental. Is very, very fundamental, because at the end of the day, the people you're trying to shape and defend, some will end up in government, some will end up in private companies and lead organizations, and they will lead from their own worldview. Emmanuel Etim is Executive Director, Advocate for Health and Rights of Women and Youths Initiative. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll find out what you're saying on X. Join us again.
So let's get started. What you're saying about the trending topics. Well, the suing of the Senate President by Senator Natasha Akpoti-Oduaghan for 100 billion and 300 million is definitely where we started from. And the first comment is from Yaya Abbas. By the way it works is the lawyer says that the aide of the Senate President must have put up that statement by the prompting of the Senate President. So the first user says it wouldn't change a thing. She might be a senator, but as far as the Constitution is concerned, she's still a subject under Babio.
That's not correct.
She must adhere to the rules governing the Senate. Well, he's just first among equals.
Absolutely.
He's a principal officer, yes, so to some extent he has powers, but I don't think he's in that sense of subject.
I'm sure subject is, that person did not want to use subject.
Well, I think this stems from the mentality, that we carry of even those first among equals, the powers that they wield, to discipline, quote unquote, erring, maybe in their own perspective, but not in your own perspective.
We're not even a subject of the president.
And we can even cite examples. So
the president is actually our servant in that sense. Sovereignty belongs to the people. So, why I'm saying this, we need to educate people. Right. Sometimes, and it's just innocently, they say these things. If they know better, they will say. So nobody is a subject of anybody. Natasha is not a subject. Yeah, he's just the first among equal. The president, we're not his subject. He's actually our servant. He's serving us. He asked for the job we gave him.
You can take that to the back.
So, Olatunji Olalekon says the Senate is an institution. Anything happens to the cause of sitting in the institution that you need to sue, not an individual. Honestly, the political parties need to take their primary seriously for quality rep.
All right, very quickly, let's move to the next talking point. This time around, we're still with the Senate. Senator Orji Okalu has urged President Tinubu to declare the late Chief MKO Abiola one of Nigeria's former presidents. Well, will this change anything? What are you saying? Marcel Marizu says, from the Constitution, he will remain a president-elect because the oath of office is missing, unless it is done posthumously. Tinubu's declaration, same with Buhari, will not change that.
All right, so we'll get to that Naira Marley part, but I think, Kaide, you've really read that copy of the Natasha's law. Yeah. So she's not suing the Senate President on what happened in the Senate.
No.
She's suing
for the comment
made by the aide of the senator on Facebook or on social media. So it's important we know so that we make statements that are guided. Naira Marley, Sam, Larry, Prime Boy have no hand in Mohbad's death. Yeah, that is the verdict of the court. This is how you're reacting to it. Dr. Muyiwa Ajao says, no case without concrete, incontrovertible evidence.
And Ogunrinu Benga says, if Nigerian court clears them, court of public opinion has to clear them. If they think the first court is enough, let's see if they can walk free in public domain like before.
Benga Okorino, I hope you're not calling for what I think you're calling for. It's important to be very guided when you use the statements online. But the court has spoken, and that's where we'll leave it on the show this morning. Thank you so much for being a part of the morning brief. Very emotional one, I must say. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
Remember, whatever happens to you is for the benefit of others, so look inwards and see how you can make a change. I'm Bukola Koka. I'll be back tomorrow.
God bless Nigeria. And Jeffrey Uzoma. Bye-bye.